So we were getting nowhere. And one of the contact people that was supposedly facilitating some things, which I don't know what he was supposedly facilitating, was Tony Pires. Now, we started going to the council meetings. We started meeting people, and that's when I met I met some people. So they'll come up later on. So at one point, I wanted to speak in front of the council, and Frank Milos says, "Oh, would you mind coming down to my office? I want to talk to you." So we go down during the council meeting, and he says, "I just want you to know you've made a difference. And we can't unring bells, but because you've brought this to the city's attention, I just want you to know that you're making a difference for anybody else. They now know that they, need to follow the policies and procedures." I guess they didn't know up to that point, or they didn't think somebody was going to call them out on it. So anyway, I knew who Frank Milos was. I had been dealing with him for public records. Actually, that's how I got the death investigation policy. A lot of my questions were being filtered to Tony Pires. And Tony Pires, anything that I was asking Tony Pires was everything was being filtered to somebody else. So at one point, Tony Pires writes me an email and says, "Any questions that you have need to go to Frank Milos." And this is a very important area, because and you'll see it later on, every question I had to be sent in the form of an APRA, and it had to be so vague that, like, it couldn't be my question. It had to be a question in general. So it was a lesson, let me tell you. So everything had to go to Frank Milos. In fact, I have some internal, I don't even know how I got connected on it, but we have them. In fact, we printed them the other day, and it was pretty much Paul Katerina saying to this one, saying to the chief, them saying, should I answer her? Or are we going to have her get this information from Frank Milos? Like, it seemed like Frank Milos was all of a sudden running the police department and what could or could not be said. And I'm just looking for answers. So anyway, so we were getting nowhere, and I was now trying to get an appointment with the mayor, because if Frank Milos is screwing up and the Pawtucket Police Department screwed up, who now? So I tried to get an appointment, and finally, Tony Pires set up an appointment for April 3rd, 2014. And I know I'm giving you a lot from 2014. I'm sorry, 2015. April 2015. So I'm giving you a lot for early on, just so that you can set the stage. So now we know where we're at, right? So April 3rd, 2015, almost a year later, we finally get an appointment with the mayor. And Tony Pires and I are in the hallway, and he says, oh, we have a mutual friend, and, that your friend came to me, let me know, what a nice lady you are, and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So I tell him who my father was. And he's like, oh my God. Oh, Lynn. Lynn. Now, I think the dude deals with dementia or something anyway, but whatever. So he's like, oh, your father was a good friend to me. And, oh, what a good friend, and all this stuff, right? So now, this is opening him up to his request. So he says to me, before we even go sit down, he says, I'm hoping that you take this the right way. And I want to ask you something. And I said, sure. Well, your father, our history of, your father was a good friend to me. I'm just going to ask that you keep my daughter out of this. Please, just keep her out of it. And I said, now, I grew up knowing his daughter, Stacey. And I said, who's your daughter? Like, how is your daughter involved in this? And he says, my daughter's name is Stacey Veroni. And she's the liaison for the Pawtucket Police Department. She works for the Attorney General's office, and she's the liaison for the Pawtucket Police Department. She's a liaison. So at the time, Tony Pires was public safety, I don't know, chief of staff, whatever he was. What was he? Director of administration, whatever he was, right? And he's telling me, before we go into this meeting, out of respect, can we keep his daughter out of this? Out of respect, for a friendship, right? My son has died. This whole place, this joint, has screwed up every bit of that, of every report, making up stories and everything. And you want me, out of respect, to not mention your daughter's name in this meeting. Out of respect. Number one, I didn't know who your daughter was. But now, I'm remembering a name, Stacey Veroni. And Paul Branley had reached out to Stacey Veroni. But he didn't want us discussing this. He did not want us discussing Stacey Veroni. So, we're at the meeting. It's my husband, Tony Pires, Paul King, and Don Grebien. And Don Grebien walks in the room, and, he extends his hand like he's going to shake my hand. No, no. I don't do that. I'm not shaking somebody's hand that has jerked me around for almost a year now without a peep from him. That ain't happening. I find that when you shake someone's hand, you're giving them the okay that they're okay, and that's not okay. So they give us some papers to look at, and it's a timeline. They have the timeline written out, and then they give us a snapshot of the computer system of when the case was opened, when the case was closed, and a couple of things in between there where someone reviewed this case. Someone reviewed it. Now, that person that reviewed it should have noticed that no major crimes were there. It wasn't that his job in reviewing to make sure that everything was done correctly. So the name there was John Seeneck. You might remember recently, supposedly, I don't know how true it is, supposedly they have found the person that murdered his brother. So there's John Seeneck's name. And I know John Seeneck. I've known them for years. Years. Name stands out? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny because do I remember John Seeneck? I could probably trip over him and not know it was him, but I know the name. I know his sister. I know his sister's ex-husband, Fred LeBrun. I know, like the Dolan. No, that name isn't new to me. I knew Teddy Dolan. Back then, Joe Montero. Bobby Morris. These names are not new to me. Holden, you think that name is new to me? No, it's not new to me. I grew up in Pawtucket. I know these names. So anyway, so we're looking at this very small. It's 5 lines. Opened, reviewed, approved, and the names are there. And there's John Seeneck. Now John Seeneck, I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry that your brother passed away. I'm sorry that your brother was murdered. But you had people jumping through hoops for years, to get to the bottom of who killed your brother. You sat with this file as it related to my son. You didn't see anything wrong with that. You know what you probably should have done? You know what? And you should have probably tried to call one of those numbers. My mother's number, my husband's number, my number. You should have tried to call any one of those numbers because they're not correct. Then you probably should have said to yourself, dumbass Pires was the only one here. What happened to David Connors? He didn't write not one word. And did you not notice there was no witness statements? Did you not notice that? You thought it looked good, huh, John? Huh, John? Again, another failure in the department. If you, as a much senior officer, if you know what I mean, looked at this and thought it was okay, there's a problem. There's a big problem, John. You want to give me a call and explain that, John? Want to explain that? Nah. It was just, yeah. You approved it. You thought it looked great. Looked great, huh? Huh, John? John, just out of curiosity, when you went down to my son's phone where it says black iPhone, did you see the picture of the phone? Did you see that it was a white iPhone? Did you look at any bit of this as you approved it, John? I'm just wondering, John. Anyway, so while we are sitting there, and now we have these 2 pieces of paper in front of us. Tony starts with his, he's investigating now, and he's trying to figure out Joseph's handwriting, and if this matches that, and this doesn't match that, and he's somewhere else. I don't know where he is, but he's somewhere, and now we bring up our conversation from October with Paul Caterina, where Paul Caterina tells us that our son was found with his nose inches to the floor. Inches. Couple inches to the floor. That's how he was found. And there goes a whole bunch of back and forth with Frank Milos having to okay that the police department release their photos to the medical examiner's office. I don't know how Frank Milos has all of a sudden become, the go-to person. The police department can't. I mean, this is something that's done every day. In fact, in the notes that we had, it clearly stated that Pires was going to send the photos to them. And here we are in April of the following year. So we're sitting there and I'm letting them know, that's a problem. That's a problem if Major Caterina is telling us one thing and the medical examiner's office is telling us something totally different. So anyway, so now, and we're talking to the chief of police, and instead of saying, let's get Caterina in here so that he can explain himself, no, he doesn't do that. He pulls out pictures of my son's deceased body and shows them to the mayor. The mayor of the city. He shows pictures to the mayor. Outside of law enforcement, that's number one. Number two, we're sitting right there. So with that, I'm like, what are you doing? What the hell did you just do? And now all of a sudden, Don Grebien's like, oh, well, we can stop this meeting. We don't have to continue. She's upset now. Why the hell wouldn't I? Why the hell wouldn't I be upset? Well, with that, there's a knock at the door. And it's Dylan Zalazzo. In comes Dylan. So Dylan is saying, oh, we got that meeting. And Don Grebien says, yeah, I'll be right there. And who peeks his nose into the room? Frank Milos. They were standing on the outside of that door, listening to everything that was happening inside that room. And that was his key to bail Don Grebien out the door. And Frank Milos wanted to know what our position was and what was being said, because he couldn't control the room because he wasn't part of the room. But it was so recently that has been brought up with Mark DeSisto. Hey Mark. You wanted the audio, you wanted the video, you wanted some kind of proof that happened. There's an article in the Valley Breeze. Did you miss that, Mark? Did you miss that? That whole privacy violation of my son by showing pictures of his body to the mayor. That privacy violation of our family. You missed that, Mark, right? You're always missing the mark, Mark. Anyway, I'm going to continue on with the whole Tony Pires, because then I receive a call from Stacey Veroni, for old times. Anyway, I will continue on.